When I entered my mid to late 30s, I had a very strange epiphany. I've spent the majority of my adulthood in childhood. I've been talking to people for 14 years about their awkward adolescent experiences, their first kiss, their first concert, their first puff. And the reason is this: a love letter that I wrote when I was in high school. I think, like a lot of epic confessions of teenage love, it was full of hope and optimism, and above all, flowery, pretentious language. It began like this. Hello, Leslie. How was your day today? Mine's quite well, I must admit. I do hope that yours is a good one, because what you're about to read may or may not add an extra color to the rainbow at day's end. So when I wrote this, I thought this was gold. I thought like I was going to give this to this girl, and this was going to blow her. This was going to change her life. Needless to say, it had zero impact on it. Like, I mean, zero impact on this person's life, but instead wound up changing the course of mine. How many of you, in hearing that bit of insipidness, how many of you started going into your mind, just by show of applause, of something you wrote that was ridiculous as a kid? How many of you guys wrote in diaries or love letters? How many of you guys are really glad, by show of applause, that you burned yours shortly after graduation? Those same people, okay. Well, there's a reason we tend to destroy that stuff, or wish that we did. And it's because culturally we tend to think of this stuff as garbage. It is ephemeral nonsense. But what if I were to tell you that the embarrassing stuff you created as a kid, like all of that stuff, actually is important, actually means something, actually reveals something? What if I were to tell you that this letter, this ridiculous thing that I wrote as a kid, wound up fostering a community of people worldwide and teaching me a very important lesson about the power of our past? I'd like to share a little bit of that lesson with you today. And that lesson began, for me, 10 years after I wrote it. I found the letter. I was home visiting my parents, and I just stumbled upon it like an archaeologist would just stumble upon some like ancient artifact, and it like blew my mind, because I thought this was ridiculous, and I laughed. And that laughter sparked an idea for a stage show. Mortified is a storytelling project where adults share their most embarrassing childhood writings in front of total strangers. It began as a stage show in Los Angeles, like I said, 14 years ago, in 2002. And it has since grown into a stage show in 20 cities worldwide, including one nearby here in Paris. We also have a podcast, a documentary, a book series. We've done TV series. Here's a little bit of a taste.
People were a little bit shocked, like, you're going to read your diary out loud? Why would you want to do that? But the people that don't want to do it love hearing other people do it.
Hello, everybody. Welcome to Mortified.
Dear Diary.
Is it true that girls don't have orgasms the first time?
I just put down my Anne Frank diary. I can really relate to her struggle.
So, fueling all of that has been a very interesting thing, which is a curating process that we call the Mortified Method. Basically, how stuff gets on stage in Mortified is sort of a two-step process. We listen to people share their embarrassing childhood creations, whether that is a diary, a love letter, a poem, a Dungeons & Dragons player profile, if you happen to have one of those. And the other thing we do is we ask people why they wrote what they wrote. So it becomes just a bit of a conversation. And that process, that curating process, is really important, because it showed me a secret that I didn't even know existed. And that is that inside of our childhood writings are stories. There are millions of stories hidden inside the literal pages of our past, stories that extend beyond the page and sort of chronicle our whole lives, even though these diary entries maybe just chronicle one day. Or what does this do? What does the Mortified Method sort of give us? So when you do this, it does a couple things. One thing is that it makes you laugh when you hear somebody read a diary entry comparing their life to Anne Frank or something. That is ridiculous and absurd. Another thing it does, though, is that it illuminates patterns of how you're the same. When you look in these diaries, you start to see examples of, oh my God, I'm still that person. So let me give you an example. This is Mandy. Mandy came to me as an adult, not this Mandy. Years later, Mandy came to me as an adult and she said, oh my God, I've got some stuff for Mortified. I was like, great, what is it? And she said, I've got song lyrics. I said, oh man, that's great. She said, but there's just one problem. I said, okay, what's that problem? Well, they're like half written. I said, well, it's okay. And so, well, let's just dig in through your notebooks. So I sat down with her and we kind of looked through stuff. What did her mementos reveal? Well, they actually revealed that her notebooks knew her a lot better than she did. Because basically I started asking Mandy some questions as we're reading them, and I'm like, well, out of curiosity, do you happen to have a pattern or a habit of like starting things in general and sort of stopping them? And she's like, no. Okay. Then we start reading some more, and I ask her, again, a slightly different version of the same question. And I said, do you ever like start projects? And I don't know, do you feel like you get mad at yourself because you constantly stop those specific projects? And she goes, well, okay, yeah. And I said, okay. Do you join clubs or start clubs and then get really excited about it, email your friends all about it, and then like stop after 1 or 2 sessions or attendances? She says, oh, yeah, that too. And then this goes on for a little bit, and at some point she interrupts me and she stops and she says, oh my God, I'm a quitter. Another thing that the Mortified Method does is that it illuminates patterns of how we've changed. This woman with spectacular taste in golf pants, she grew up in Canada, and like a lot of teenagers, she liked writing poetry. Most teenagers, when they write poetry, they write things like love poems, and they might write poems about war, things that are very emotionally expressive. She was different. She wrote a poem about the human body, but like not even like any like genital area or like whatever a teenager would be sort of upset. She wrote a poem about something very clinical, which was lungs. What did her mementos reveal? Well, her future. Her mementos revealed her future, because I started asking her, I was like, well, why did you write that and not this other stuff that teenagers tend to write? And she said, well, the thing is, I grew up in this household where being vulnerable, being emotional, or any kind of being expressive in any way was not nurtured. It was not an encouraged thing. I said, oh, okay. And of course, when you're a teenager like that, just because you're told not to have emotions doesn't mean you don't have them. It just sort of builds up. Flash forward 19 years. This girl like is dying to I feel like, to emote. And as you can see, she's into singing. She's actually singing here at I think at a retirement home. And basically she winds up meeting a record producer, and the record producer says, I want to work with you on an album. And she's like, oh my God, this is so exciting. And he says, but there's just one thing. You got it, just whatever you're going through, whatever you feel, like don't give me this pop whatever, like I want you to feel it. I want to like let the page bleed. And she says, okay. And the result was this. An emotionally volcanic album full of rage about heartbreak and emotion and failed relationships and teen angst, and it became the voice of a generation. So her mementos reveal a blueprint for change. The last thing the Mortified Method can do is it can create empathy. Give you an example of that. This is Mike. Mike wound up saying, oh, I've got stuff for Mortified. I said, great, what do you have? And he tells me, I wrote these detective stories when I was a kid. And I was like, oh, that sounds awesome. And he said, yeah, and basically he would write these stories where he would cast himself and all of his friends. He would cast himself as their own kid crime-solving club, league thing, whatever. And they would fight bad guys, and they would save the day, and it was all very good. I said, okay, great. So, but I almost didn't get to hear any of this. And the reason I didn't get to almost hear any of this is because Mike shows up like an hour and a half late to this meeting. So what did his mementos reveal? Well, actually, his mementos revealed the reason that he shows up late, and it turns out that happens a lot with him. As I started talking to him about, like, you know, why he wrote what he wrote, he told me, well, I really liked action films and cops and robbers and stuff, so that was the genre, and I'm 10, so like I just like that stuff. But I said, like, well, why did you cast yourself as this hero in this thing? Like, why not write about some guy? And he said, well, to be honest, and I know you might not believe it from this photo, but he got picked on a lot. And he was a bit of an outcast, and things were kind of hard for Mike. And fiction, and this is true with a lot of kids, wound up being this vicarious way where he could recast himself and sort of reframe the narrative of his life and sort of let him be a hero in this world. In fact, his sidekick in these stories, the Robin to his Batman, is actually the most popular kid in school, who's like not his friend in real life. Yes, aw. That need to be a hero, to be well-liked, is something that is pervasive in his life like today, right? Because that same need is the same one that makes Mike say yes when 5 people invite him to an event on the same day at roughly the same time. And so he overcommits, and he winds up stuff in life. So through these just like frivolous little stories, or seemingly frivolous little stories, I was able to understand really where this guy is coming from. So here's the cool thing about this process of like sort of digging up your past in this way. You do not need a stage show like Mortified whatsoever. All you need is an artifact, whether that's a diary or a love letter or a poem, whatever. Yeah, and actually, if you're one of those people who never wrote anything or torched your past, a prom photo will do, a yearbook photo. The other thing you need is just a person who's willing to listen, or at least laugh at you. Here's how you can try this yourself. So first, you have a conversation with you and your friend get together, and you have a conversation about who you were back then, childhood stuff, whether that's stats, maybe if you don't know, like, how many siblings do you have, where'd you grow up, all that kind of stuff, what religion were you? But it could also be obsessions, fears, milestones. You could go specific, things like, what was the first scary movie you ever saw in your life? And then do the exact same thing, have a conversation about your adult life, right? The stats, the milestones, the fears, the obsessions, all those weird quirks. Spend like 5 minutes talking about each. And then the fun part, share the shame. And this is where discoveries get made, and sometimes it even gets weird and emotional, but it's kind of exciting, is that you get to return to that favorite childhood activity that we all grew up on, which is play connect the dots. Except here, you're connecting the patterns that you heard, the little fragments that you heard about adulthood, and the stuff you heard about their childhood. And you start to notice little through lines, whether it's a change or whether it's, oh my God, you're still that person. So this all brings us back to, for me, where this all began, which is with a letter to a girl who has zero idea that any of this has transpired, or that she's even responsible for any of it. And that's because I chickened out and I never gave this person the letter. But I got something a hell of a lot better, which begs a question. What did my mementos reveal? Well, if we were to think about the type of kid who would write, hello, how was your day today? Mine's quite well, I must admit. I do hope that yours is a good one, because what you're about to read may or may not add an extra color to the rainbow at day's end. That kid's a bit of an overthinker. That's some pretty overstuffed language right there. And something I didn't realize about myself, I'm sure my friends were like, oh yeah, but like something I couldn't articulate for myself until honestly going through stuff like this constantly, is that's me. That's me even preparing for this speech. I'm a chronic overthinker. And there's, of course, negative sides of that. That's incredibly annoying personality trait to some. But it's also a really positive trait because it gives you an obsessiveness. And that obsessiveness can help you in some ways. For instance, it can give me a tenacity to grow something as odd as Mortified and keep that going. I'd like to leave you with something that harkens back to your favorite memory of childhood, homework, which is want you to go home. If any of this meant anything to you, go home and become your own archaeologist of everyday life. Dig something up and share it with just one person, whatever that is, whoever that is, because you will be surprised what stories you discover hidden in the literal pages of your past.